Rink Wide, Vancouver. Another one of these summer sessions. Jeff Patterson along with Irfaan Gafar, and all quiet on the Canucks front, Irf, but we do have some hockey news, and I suppose if we reach really deep, we can tie things back to the Vancouver Canucks because their chief rival now, team that eliminated them from the Stanley Cup playoffs, one that went to the Stanley Cup final under the gun here for the next couple of days. Big decisions in Edmonton, whether to match or whether to let one or both of Philip Broberg and Dylan Holloway walk to the St. Louis Blues. Offer sheets tendered earlier this week, and certainly shots fired in the Western Conference of the National Hockey League.
I thought you were going to go and say, well, Connor McDavid got married, but we'll let that one slide. Yeah, no, it's interesting. Anarchy, right? We don't really see offer sheets too much in the NHL anymore, but this is an interesting one because it's not only to one player, it's two players now with the Edmonton Oilers, and both spent time in the American Hockey League last season. I don't think that the Oilers are going to meet the Philip Broberg price at $4.8 million on an AAV, but I do think the Dylan Holloway one, they're going to get done, and they're going to figure a way to make that work. Now, with all the uncertainty with, the Evander Kane drama, Philip Broberg at 4.5, with all the uncertainty with the Evander Kane and what's going on there in surgery, and is he going to start the season on LTIR? They're going to have some money there with his cap hit as well. But yeah, I don't see the Oilers signing Broberg, but I do see them coming to an agreement with Holloway there and matching that offer sheet.
Hey, if you're Broberg,
I know.
What a world that another team comes along and is willing to jack your rate by basically 5 times. He's a restricted free agent with no leverage late in the summer, was basically going to have to accept whatever the Oilers put in front of him. Now, I know that some in Edmonton are saying hey, shame on the Oilers, should have had their house in order, get these deals done and don't leave yourself open to this kind of stuff. But look, there's still a bunch of RFAs around the National Hockey League. As you said, this is really strategic on the part of the St. Louis Blues. First of all, they had to go and get their own second round pick that they had traded away back from Pittsburgh. And once they accomplished that, then they were in a position to tender these offer sheets. And it wasn't just one guy, it was 2 guys. It was right up against the threshold to keep the compensation as low as possible. So, some thought went into this, obviously, on the part of the St. Louis Blues. And the bigger picture for Edmonton is that every dollar matters now, but also, next summer, it's all about Leon Draisaitl and, to a lesser degree, but still a big ticket item, in Evan Bouchard. Both of those guys, after the playoffs that they had, they're going to be in for massive raises. So, yeah, the idea of jacking Broberg to clear almost $5 million, just not sure that that's a road that the Edmonton Oilers can go down. If you're Dylan Holloway, you're probably sitting there thinking, okay, again, restricted free agent, not a lot of leverage, was probably going to get a raise coming off his entry-level deal, but the Blues have basically gone and doubled it. But if you just step back, if you're Dylan Holloway, do you want to go and play in St. Louis for $2 million? Or do you want to stick around with McDavid and Draisaitl and a team that just went to the Stanley Cup final? Now, the decision's out of his hands, and I'm with you. I think the Oilers are going to match on Holloway. Broberg's probably going to be a St. Louis Blue. I do think it's important, and again, we're looking at this specific instance because it's the one that's in front of us right now, but really this goes for any team around the National Hockey League. If a competitor comes and tries to take 2 of your guys via offer sheet, I think you have to match one at the very least. You can't just cave and roll over. If you're the Edmonton Oilers and throw your hands in the air, you can't allow a rival to dictate the way that you do your business entirely. Certainly the Blues have gone a long way in doing that, in setting these prices, but don't you have to match at least one just to sort of, show some sort of pushback?
Yeah, I agree. I do really think that they're going to match Holloway. The Bouchard or the Broberg one's interesting because, a lot of people you talk to says he's not a guy that can drive his own pair. He's a guy that needs to play with someone else. And, it was evident with that at some point, but he did, have some moments there late in the regular season and obviously in the playoffs for the Edmonton Oilers. But yeah, at that price tag and what they're looking to do in the future, you mentioning Bouchard and obviously Leon Draisaitl. I know the cap's eventually going to go up to a pretty significant amount, but still, if you're going to lock in $4.5 million to a defenseman, you're going to need it to be someone that's probably taking some of that money and giving it to Evan Bouchard as opposed to Philip Broberg.
Now, this is a Canucks pod, so I mean, I don't want to spend the whole time talking about the Oilers and the Blues, but they are the front page news in the
Yeah.
National Hockey League at a time when not a whole lot else is going on. There's a couple of things to look at from a Canucks perspective. One is that Artur Silovs was a restricted free agent with no leverage. Good on the Canucks for getting that done. I'm not saying that there was another team that was going to swoop in, but by taking care of business and getting Silovs' name on a contract, you eliminate that possibility altogether. And so that's where, I don't know if this had to do with the transition in management in Edmonton, if this was something that just kind of fell between the cracks, or if the Oilers just thought, hey, like, we've got all the cards here. These guys are going to take the contracts we put in front of them. But they had to know at the very least that this was a possibility somehow, some way, even if they weren't prepared for the double offer sheet. But again, for the Vancouver Canucks, just taking care of business, it shows the importance of getting your work done early in the offseason so that the poachers can't come and sort of circle above.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you look at the job that, Jim Rutherford and Patrick Allvin and their staffs have done over the last couple of seasons in taking care of business. Now, obviously, the JT Miller contract went a little bit late and things like that. And you see players get traded during the regular season. But by all accounts, this offseason was very tidy in everything that they did. They went and had their free agents targeted. They were able to get them all. Then you get Daniel Sprong a few weeks later, obviously, adding to your team and depth. And that's all done by mid-August, right? Now you're just sitting pretty. Rick Tocchet knows what he's going to have here as we approach training camp. Obviously, they're going to be excited about young stars happening up in Penticton and then training camp as well. So for this team now, it's there. Patrick Allvin has given Rick Tocchet, I'm sure, what he has wanted to help facilitate and kind of shore up his roster there. But there's always additions that could be made, right? So I think that it's going to be in a wait and see period here for the Vancouver Canucks. And as we get through training camp, I don't think that there is going to be a PTO. I mean, you never know with these things. You saw Jacob Vrana now on a PTO with the Washington Capitals. So things could happen in that sense. But as you see it and as you look it up, this roster is probably going to be exactly how it is come training camp.
The other way to sort of tie this offer sheet thing back to the Canucks is that, look, the Canucks already took Vincent Desharnais from the Edmonton Oilers.
Yeah.
So, if Broberg leaves, that's one defenseman out the door to St. Louis. Another comes to Vancouver. All of a sudden, the depth of that Edmonton team that was still in question, and we saw it was in flux in the playoffs, and we know the heat that's on a guy like Darnell Nurse and Cody Ceci. Obviously, Bouchard and Ekholm, terrific. But beyond that, there were already questions about the Edmonton Oilers' depth, and now two of the guys that played on that team last year at different times, could be on different teams around the National Hockey League. So if you're the Canucks and you're measuring yourself against the Oilers, I mean, anything that happens to, I'm not suggesting that Philip Broberg in and on of himself leaving, brings the Canucks to a level of the Edmonton Oilers. I still think that the Oilers are the team to beat in that Pacific Division. But, are the Oilers as strong? If Evander Kane starts the season on LTIR and if Philip Broberg leaves the hockey club, no. So, I mean, all of these things, I think, play into the Canucks' favor a little bit just in terms of uncertainty there in Edmonton.
Yeah. I mean, Troy Stetcher's going to have to play a lot more after, coming off surgery and things like that. He's going to be a guy that's put into that lineup. I know he's a depth defenseman, and now he's going to probably have to play every single night if they do end up losing Philip Broberg to the St. Louis Blues. But yeah, I mean, look, I agree with you. I think that, the Oilers are the team to beat. I mean, look, the additions that they made up front, right? I mean, you got Victor Arvidsson, you got Jeff Skinner, you got two guys that can put the puck in the net to go along with two guys that all they do is put the puck in the net. So there's going to be some interesting times around the Edmonton Oilers. But I think there was a report that suggested that, Kenny Holland was told to get contracts done for those two guys, and then it didn't happen for whatever reason. And now there's a new management place or a team in place in the Edmonton Oilers structure. So a lot of crazy times happening there in Edmonton right now.
Yeah, again, it's great for guys like us in our business and just the hockey world at large, especially in the middle of August when there isn't a whole lot else going on, that now people are digging in and countdown is on. The Oilers have through the weekend here to make their decision. Again, I don't think they roll over entirely. I don't think that the Broberg contract at $4.5 million for each of the next 2 years is palatable to them. And it's a massive overpay for Broberg. Don't get me wrong here. But if you're the St. Louis Blues, you're in a position there. Again, they did what they were able to do under the terms of the collective bargaining agreement. It's a tool that's available to them. And now we'll see how the Edmonton Oilers respond. I just want to go back to something you mentioned there, because we are starting to see it a little bit. We're a month out from training camps. So guys without contracts are going to start to sort of try to figure out their next steps here. And that is PTOs, pro tryouts. A couple of years ago, we saw Danny DeKeyser up in Whistler, got in a preseason game or two, didn't go anywhere. But the year before that, Alex Chason, a late addition to the training camp roster out in Abbotsford, and the guy made the hockey club. So, there is a recent history here with the Vancouver Canucks. Last year, they didn't go down that road. And right now, a month out from camp, certainly haven't heard any rumblings. But I do wonder, if you're the Canucks, you're not that strong up the middle. Like, certainly I think there's room for another. I don't know that there's room on the salary cap, but just in terms of the depth chart, without Elias Lindholm back, they're not as strong down the middle. So I do wonder if there's a veteran setter out there that would look at that and think that maybe there's an opportunity to come to Vancouver. And then ultimately we spent all summer talking about, is this defense core good enough? Could they use another puck-moving defender? And when they spent what little money they had on Daniel Sprong, I was a little surprised, just because I thought maybe they were going to save some money and try and address the defensive issues. So I do wonder if the door is open at the very least. I know on Canucks Army in the mailbag the other day, I wondered about a guy like Justin Schultz, who won a couple of cups in Pittsburgh, a West Kelowna guy. He had 26 points in Seattle last year. He's 34 now. But the thing with pro tryouts, there is no downside other than you got to hand out a tracksuit and a hotel room. The onus is on the player to come and really make an impression. And sometimes, the Canucks have enough veterans, so it's not. Sometimes PTOs are just about filling out the veteran quota for those
preseason games.
Well, I don't think that's an issue for the Canucks this year, but I do wonder. I'm not going to sit here and make any grand proclamations or predictions, and certainly don't have any intel. But I don't know, at the center ice position and on defense, I just don't see a downside to letting a motivated guy come to your camp and see what he can do.
Yeah, I mean, these guys are all, you mentioned Justin Schultz. We'll just start there. 34 years old, 26 points at the Kraken, like you said. I think he's a guy that, you'd think that would be motivated. Look, Justin Schultz and the Vancouver Canucks have always been connected.
You're right.
I think ever since he came into the National Hockey League, it's just obviously from where he's from and things like that. And he obviously chose a different path for the way that his career's gone. And now is it going to circle back? Is he going to be a guy where the Canucks say, all right, let's take a flyer on him and see what he has left in the tank, if anything? And at worst, does he become our eighth defenseman? Does he become a guy that we can throw into the lineup? He's played big minutes of big, very important hockey games, but they've brought in a guy like that before. They've brought in a type of guy like Ian Cole, right? He was a guy that came in with all this Stanley Cup experience and all that. And then in the playoffs, a lot of us were looking at Ian Cole as being the scapegoat a little bit, along with obviously Elias Pettersson. But I think that, you have to look at it, err on the side of caution a little bit just for some of these guys and, what they have in the tank. It might be great for the regular season and it look good, but when it gets time to the playoffs, you're really going to need your players to come in and step up. So I'm not entirely sure how much Justin Schultz does have left in the tank, but it would definitely be one to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and I think too, you got to be mindful of contract situations.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, the Canucks don't have a lot of, I think they're at 49 of their available 50 contracts. So it's not like they're in a position just to be, throwing out deals for anybody. So I'm not expecting multiple PTOs, but we'll see. We'll see where it goes. Again, there's a month, and some of these guys may still find a contract. Like, it's not out of the realm entirely that a guy like Justin Schultz could get an NHL contract from a team that has waited through the summer months here and thinks that there's enough gas there left in the tank. But I don't know where Justin Schultz summers these days, but he is from West Kelowna, training camp in Penticton. He can just get in the car and zip down, be there in like 40 minutes or whatever.
You stay at home,
ready to go. So yeah, exactly. Sleep in his own bed each night to come back and do his thing. So that's something that we'll watch, but we're starting to see that a little bit around the National Hockey League. Rink Wide here in the summer months, a presentation of the Vancouver Canadians, who are out on the road right now, but they return for 6 in a row against Everett next Tuesday at Nat Bailey Stadium. Fireworks extravaganza on Thursday the 22nd, nooner on Friday the 23rd. Good reason to pack up early from work and get out to the ballpark. Family Fun Sunday coming up on August 25th. Games are going to be packed, so get your tickets early. Do not wait, and give them a call at 604-872-5232 or go online, canadiansbaseball.com. Some other news from around the National Hockey League this week, and it came out of the center of the universe, so you knew that the hockey world would stop in its tracks to hear and see that Auston Matthews is the new captain of the Toronto Maple Leafs. Why it had to happen in mid-August, I'm not sure. It could have been a sort of first day of training camp kind of thing, but hey, they had the spotlight and the attention to themselves. So Auston Matthews, who's had an A there and is the best player on the Toronto Maple Leafs and is clearly one of the best players in the National Hockey League. It's his team. I'm not surprised. Like, look, John Tavares did what he could. I had another strong, I think he had 65 points last year. It's not like, he's completely faded away. He's only 33. And he's going to get, they basically swapped. But just to broaden the picture here a little bit, like, what about the role of the captaincy in today's National Hockey League? Like, how big a deal do you think it is that Auston Matthews now has a C instead of an A? Like, clearly the guy's the leader on that hockey club, the face of that franchise. It just kind of feels to me like this is his team. This is the right move for them.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think it's a little overrated. Excuse me. I think it's a little overrated, the captaincy. When you look at it, I mean, he's the guy that goes and talks to the ref. He's the guy that probably, is going to be the one after wins and losses now in front of the media at all times. You're going to have to go and do a lot more of the stuff in the community and things like that. I think that's one of the things that John Tavares did well, obviously being from Ontario and from those parts, he's a guy that, took that responsibility, and it was just large. Like it was really the whole ceremony. And I don't think we've ever seen that or ceremony for a guy being stripped of the captaincy, having to give it to the new guy, having, Mitch Marner and Morgan Riley sitting front row. John Tavares' parents were there. His kids were there. I think Auston Matthews' family was there as well. It was just a very large thing, like you mentioned, for the middle of August. But that's the Toronto Maple Leafs, right? And I think it is a big deal for them both. And I think that, talking to Brad Treliving with John Tavares, I think that, in this, he's like, all right, well, I'm going to do this. I probably want a contract extension now too. So he's going to give me a guy that needs one as well. I think that when you look at that team specifically, I think that Morgan Riley is a very big vocal leader of that group. I think that, there are some other teams around the National Hockey League that have guys that have the captain, but there are other players that lead. I think that, you look at right now, I think there's 6 teams in the National Hockey League that don't have a captain right now. And, it's one of those things that's going to happen. But I don't like hold that role with that much, I don't keep it to the highest regard as it is.
Well, it's funny because you think back in Canucks history, twice the captain has changed within the same team. Like, obviously, when a player leaves, like Bo Horvat was the captain, he leaves, then you have to replace him, and they got it right with Quinn Hughes. So without a doubt, Quinn Hughes, that was a terrific choice, and what a season he had, 92 points in the Norris. But you go back, obviously, Mark Messier coming in and hijacking the captaincy from Trevor and essentially forcing the exit of the organization of Trevor Linden. That one didn't go so well. 15 years later, Roberto Luongo had his 2 years. It was kind of fun. It was quirky. Gave us something to talk about. But Louis wanted to focus on the job at hand. And at times, I think being the captain in a Canadian market was a distraction for him. So, it was a seamless transition. And again, the right call then in that moment. Henrik Sedin became the captain. Had a good long run, got the Canucks to the President's Trophy twice in the Stanley Cup Final, all those types of things. So, there's 2 examples of how it can go. I don't expect that the transition there in Toronto is going to be an issue. I don't think that John Tavares is going to be a distraction of any kind. I just think that the time was right, that, it's Auston Matthews' team, and just sort of to extend that a little bit and to move the conversation away from Toronto. Hockey is so full of traditions and feels like it's so slow to sort of come around on certain things. And this is one of them. Like, to me, the captaincy isn't a lifetime contract, and it shouldn't be. Like, teams change, coaches change, the locker room dynamic changes, all of that type. Like, Tavares had a run. Did the Leafs win a Stanley Cup? No. So I'm not close enough to know what kind of leader John Tavares is in the locker room. The guy shows up and plays hard. I can see that. But there's nothing that says that, he had to be the captain for the entirety of his time in Toronto. And it just feels to me like, they've got a new coach there. So it's the start of a new era. Why not change the dynamic somewhat? And I just think that's something that hockey could apply across the board, is that, it doesn't have to be the same guy for all time. That, I think you could move the letters around and, again, we always talk about stripping the cat, no, I just think you're looking to shake things up a little bit. So I don't know. That's just kind of how I look at things.
No, absolutely. I agree with you. I think that, especially with Toronto, Matthews, Riley, I mean, maybe not Marner, but I think those are the two guys that were probably going to be it. If it was going to change, and good for Auston Matthews, right? And he's what is it, the second non-Canadian captain of the Toronto Maple Leafs now, first American, obviously. But yeah, I mean, he's a guy that scores. He puts the puck in the net. He gets people out of their seats. He puts butts into the seats in that building. And now just you're adding another, responsibility for him. And I think that, he's been in the National Hockey League for quite some time now. He's won a lot of awards as a member of the Toronto Maple Leafs. So why not just be able to give that to him and kind of, change the guard a little bit there in Toronto?
Just go back a year when the Canucks decided on Quinn Hughes.
Yeah.
Curious about your thoughts, if you recall, in the moment, because I remember, I guess I assumed in my head that Elias Pettersson was going to be the captain, that it was going to follow the lineage of Marcus Naslund and Henrik Sedin and, top scorer and guy that certainly was projecting to be the best player. Hands up right here. I got that one wrong. And it wasn't that I didn't believe in Quinn Hughes. Certainly was never going to doubt the player. I just didn't know what kind of leader he would be. But they got it right. Absolutely, they got it right. And again, he's not an in-your-face kind of guy, but his words carry weight. Clearly has the respect of every single guy in that organization, as he should, and does most of his talking by his actions on the ice. And that's his leadership style. But they got it right without a question now when I look back a year later. Do you remember what you thought when you heard that Quinn was going to be the captain?
Well, I didn't for a second think it was going to be Elias Pettersson. I just thought that, kind of the way that things were going that year as it ended before Quinn got named captain was Quinn was always the one. He was always the one in front of the media after wins and losses. And as you mentioned, his words carried weight. There was a time, I think it was after a game, when people were asking about his defensive issues, and people watching him, he's like, well, a lot of those people don't watch me play or don't watch me play defense or something like that. But, there's different times and different moments where you looked at it and you say, okay, I think this is going to be Quinn's team. And, like you mentioned, Jeff, he does a lot of his talking on the ice, and his play dictates it. And, the captaincy, again, when he was named captain up in Kelowna, I think it was for training camp, you go and do all the things in the community. You do all of that, you have those certain types of responsibilities. So I think it was a no-brainer for the Vancouver Canucks and their organization. And I think that they got it right for sure. But I remember thinking that, I believed it was going to be Quinn. I didn't for a second think it was going to be Elias Pettersson, not because I didn't think he could do it. I just think that he's a different type of guy. The media is not his favorite thing to do after wins or even after a loss, right? But that's part of your responsibility as the captain of a National Hockey League team. It's traditional. You're standing there after wins and losses or after losses and have to answer all the tough questions. So I think that that's one of the reasons why the Vancouver Canucks elected to go in a different direction. And I think it's going to work out very well for them.
Yeah, I think, maybe the first sign we got of Quinn's true leadership was that night in Tampa, I think it was, when, and I believe it was Patrick Johnson of Post Media, when he's asking him about Tanner Pearson and the hand injury and the way that things had been handled. And Quinn basically called out the organization, and you kind of thought, wow, that's a juicy quote. But again, I think it showed a guy that was coming into his own, wasn't afraid to speak up on behalf of a teammate, question. He could have been next, needing sort of the medical treatment and just questioning, were these guys getting the best from the organization? And I thought, wow, that's leadership in that moment. And, it's carried on from then. And so, yeah, absolutely. Quinn Hughes getting set to start his second season as the captain of the Vancouver Canucks. We were talking about Auston Matthews, and obviously he's going to be right up at the top of the list around the National Hockey League in terms of favorites to win the Rocket Richard. I know it's mid-August, but what are the lines telling us? The early lines telling us about goal scoring in the National Hockey League this coming season.
Well, it's funny, Jeff. You look at the Rocket Richard and Auston Matthews is a minus 120 favorite to win the award, right? I think he's a guy that all he does is score goals in the National Hockey League. Sorry, it's -1. Was it -110 now? It was -120 earlier. And then you look at the Vancouver Canucks. There's a few of them there. Elias Pettersson was at +7,000. JT Miller also as well, pretty high up, and Brock Besser, who led the Canucks in goals last season as well. But there's some other guys on there that you look at and say, okay, there's some pretty good value there for some of those guys. It would be interesting to see what's going to happen there. But obviously, Jeff, this segment brought to you by Bet365, proud partner of Sekeres and Price, Canucks Conversation, and Rink Wide Vancouver. Open an account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets. So whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff that you go and look on there right now, different lines of different awards. I can't remember what the Norris Trophy was, but Quinn Hughes is definitely up there after winning it. So just some fun stuff to look at.
Yeah, it's funny just looking at that board too. You're just reminded of how many great goal scorers there are in the National Hockey League, whether it's Matthews, David Pastrnak, who's been a 60 goal scorer, obviously the guys in Edmonton, Kaprizov, on and on it goes. So going to be fascinating to see ultimately who stands alone, or maybe they won't, maybe there'll be a tie, but who's going to be the front runners for goal scoring around the National Hockey League. But to put you on the spot then, Irf, mid-August here, we won't ask for predictions of numbers, but as you sit here in the middle of summer, what's your gut tell you about who's going to lead the Vancouver Canucks in goals this coming season?
I wanted to say Jake DeBrusk. I really did. But that's just, I don't think it's going to happen. I think it's going to be either Elias Pettersson or JT Miller. Look, 3 goals separated the two last season, and Brock Besser had 40. I don't think Brock Besser is going to repeat his 40. 35 is a great number for Brock, even 30 as well. But I think it's going to be one of Elias Pettersson or JT Miller. I think when you look at them both, I mean, JT Miller obviously shoots the puck a lot. The power play, everything kind of goes through him as well. And for Elias Pettersson, you hope you get a guy that's going to come into this season angry at the way his season ended and come in motivated and come in ready to play and come in hungry to put pucks in the back of the net, because that's his job. So I wanted to say Jake DeBrusk, but I'm going to go Elias Pettersson.
Yeah, it's funny. I'll go Pettersson as well. I'm buying into this idea that he is going to come back to make some sort of statement here and try and silence the noise. We know that he doesn't like the noise in the marketplace. Well, the best way to keep the noise level down is to do his thing. And if it can start early, get ahead of the curve, have the same kind of start that he did last year, and then follow that up with the second half. So I think a motivated Elias Pettersson in the first year of this contract. I'm with you. Can he get to 40 for the first time in his career? We'll see. DeBrusk just feels like a bit of a bridge too far for me. A 27 goal scorer, but I think to lead this team, it's going to take something close to 40. I mean, it was 40 last year. Kuzmenko had 39 the year before. So I think you're going to, I think the Canucks will have a 40 goal scorer or somebody that's right there knocking on the door. And I'm not sure that Jake DeBrusk is going to be able to get to that point for the Vancouver Canucks. Quick little note here. Again, there isn't a whole lot going on with the Vancouver Canucks, but we should mention that both Artur Silovs and Teddy Bluger are going to be playing some high-stakes hockey here in, I think it's 10 days' time.
Yeah.
The final weekend of August, they're involved in a 4-team round robin, and Latvia is going to be the host team. So they're going to have home ice advantage. We saw what that meant in the World Championships a couple of years ago, but it's a 4-team round robin, and the team that finishes with the best record punches its ticket to the 2026 Olympics. So a fair bit on the line here. These guys want to be Olympians. They want to be, especially coming off, we spent the last couple episodes talking about the summer games here, but we're talking about the winter games in 2026 in Italy. So, we'll see. Artur Silovs was a national hero after that World Championship bronze a couple of years ago, and Teddy Bluger has committed. In fact, I think there's 4 NHLers that are Latvian. They've all committed to play for their team, and we'll see if that gives them an edge. It's one of 3 separate tournaments over that same weekend. Same thing will apply, that there'll be one team that emerges and will make its way to the Olympics, but I think the one that's going to have the focus of Canucks fans will involve a couple of Vancouver Canucks. So something to watch, actual hockey games that have been played that matter later on this month. Now, August isn't generally a time that you think of hockey being played, but 4 years ago, right now, the Vancouver Canucks were involved, as were many teams, in the summer bubble in Edmonton. nobody in the stands. The world was still in the throes of COVID. The NHL had done what it had to do to get clearance to have the two bubbles, the one in Toronto and the one in Edmonton. The Canucks played in the one in Edmonton. And of course, everything shifted then to Edmonton before the Stanley Cup was awarded. If you go back in the time machine, Irf, what do you recall about summer hockey in 2020?
I remember us going to the first practice, it might have been, and sitting in the 300 level, obviously social distancing and all of that. And then watching that Montreal Canadiens game, I think it was 8-6 or something wild. And Tyler Toffoli had a hat trick against the Vancouver Canucks, or it was something wild like that where he kind of went off. But it was bizarre. I mean, I spent a month in Edmonton after in September covering that. So wild times to be a part of. But yeah, it was something that I don't know if we're ever going to see again. Hopefully not, for everyone's health sake, and then things like that. But yeah, it was a very different way to watch hockey games. I'll tell you that.
Well, you're kind of getting your seasons confused there, because Toffoli was a Canuck in the bubble.
Oh, he was a Canuck, yeah, the bubble,
and then came back and torched them the following year because of that Thanksgiving Day when he and Tanev and Markstrom and Stetcher all walked out the door as free agents. But it's funny you mentioned, like, as much as I remember watching the games from afar, because I wasn't in Edmonton, but that first day, you're right, like, hockey had stopped in, what was it, March of that spring, and we didn't know if the season would be completed or where it would go. Ultimately, there were these plans for this summer bubble in Edmonton, and going back to a training camp in July, walking into Rogers Arena in the middle of like a sunny summer day after being away from the game for months. And you're right, masks on, socially distanced, all in the upper bowl to watch the Canucks practice. And it was just the way of the world then. We didn't have any access. So we're in the rink, but all the interviews are being done by Zoom. The guys are like 2 floors below you, but that was the only interaction we had with the players. So the games themselves, I remember Bo going off a couple of times, the Canucks torching the defending champion Blues, obviously. Thatcher Demko became Bubble Demko. Chris Tanev with the unlikely overtime winner against Minnesota. And I remember, too, just the idea they had one game before they went into the actual play-in against Minnesota. They had a pre-tournament game against the Winnipeg Jets, and just it was the first game in months, and it just seemed so bizarre to have the Vancouver Canucks back and the NHL back. And I'm with you 1,000%. Let's hope that we never see anything like that again for so many reasons. But yeah, 4 years ago, time marches on. They were playing bubble hockey in Edmonton. They won't be playing bubble hockey this year, and there will be people back in the stands. So when they get going here, we're a month out from Young Stars training camp. Beyond that, both of those events in Penticton this year, and then on to the preseason. So we're getting there. Still a month away, and I would assume that there was so much focus on this group last year, getting back to Vancouver, skating informally together, try to get a jump on things. And look, they got off to this great start. It worked for them last year, so I would assume that that'll be the game plan for most of the guys to get back here in the next couple of weeks and start skating as a group. I know Troy Stetcher's got his pro camp coming up at the end of the month out in Richmond, and I'm sure some Canucks will be taking part in that. And beyond that, then it's ramping it up for the season ahead. And we're all looking forward to it here at Rink Wide. But we'll call it a day there. Last one for us here for the month of August, because I got a suitcase packed and I'm heading out of the country here for a couple of weeks, getting a family vacation at the end of summer. I know you got some travel plans as well. So we'll reconvene after Labor Day. We'll be that much closer to hockey season. But enjoy what's left of the summer, everybody. And thanks so much for checking out another episode of Rink Wide Vancouver, a presentation of the Vancouver Canadians and Bet365. I'm Jeff. He's Irf. We'll talk to you in September.
Thanks for watching this video. For more great content from Canucks Army, check out Sakaris and Price, Rink Wide Vancouver, or our show, Canucks Conversation. We're your one-stop shop for interviews, breaking news, and a live Canucks postgame show hosted by Jeff Patterson.